Chocolate Before Sugar, The Ancient History of Cacao. Alternative working title: Before Chocolate Bars, The 5,000-Year Journey of Cacao. 2 core research question: How did a bitter tropical seed become one of the world's most famous foods, and where did humans first begin using cacao? The documentary investigates the earliest archaeological evidence for cacao, its domestication and movement through ancient South America, its transformation within Mesoamerican societies, its ritual and economic importance, its encounter with Europeans and their technological and economic changes that eventually produced the chocolate familiar today. 3 unique story angle. This is not simply the history of chocolate. It is the story of how humans repeatedly transformed the same difficult plant into something completely different. The journey begins not with European chocolate bars, but with a tropical tree growing thousands of years ago in the upper Amazon. The documentary then follows cacao northward and forward through time. Wild cacao, early domestication, ancient beverages, Maya ritual, Aztec economy, European transformation, sugar, industrial chocolate, the modern chocolate bar. The central storytelling question is, how did a bitter seed that originally tasted almost nothing like modern chocolate become one of humanity's most recognizable foods? 4 executive research summary. For much of the 20th century, popular histories of chocolate placed its earliest important development primarily in Mesoamerica. Archaeological research has significantly changed that picture. In 2018, researchers reported 3 independent lines of evidence. Cacao starch grains absorbed theobromine residues and ancient DNA from the Santa Ana La Florida site in southeastern Ecuador. The evidence dates cacao use there to approximately 5,300 years ago, making it the earliest unequivocal archaeological evidence of pre-Columbian cacao use identified at the time, and pointing to the upper Amazon as the oldest known center of cacao domestication. This does not mean that ancient Ecuadorians were eating modern chocolate bars. Cacao is a plant. Chocolate is a collection of later human processing traditions. That distinction is fundamental to the story. The cacao tree produces large pods containing seeds surrounded by sweet pale pulp. The seeds themselves are bitter. Through fermentation, drying, roasting, grinding, and mixing, humans learned to transform them into beverages and foods. Archaeological and historical evidence shows that these processes became especially important in Mesoamerica. By the pre-classic Maya period, cacao was already being consumed in beverages. Chemical residue from ceramic vessels at Colha in northern Belize indicates chocolate consumption by approximately 600 BC. Maya art and vessels provide further evidence for the social importance of cacao. Some vessels were designed for cacao beverages with depictions showing the drink being poured to create a froth. Cacao was not simply a sweet dessert. It could be bitter, spiced, frothy, ritualized, socially important, and associated with status. Some cacao beans also became valuable enough to function as currency in parts of Mesoamerica. While cacao itself participated in tribute and exchange systems, the story changes dramatically after European contact. Chocolate entered European luxury culture as a beverage rather than as the solid candy most people recognize today. By the 17th century, chocolate, coffee, and tea had become important new beverages in Europe, stimulating new forms of cups, pot stirrers, and serving equipment. Sugar played a critical role in this transformation. European demand for sugar expanded dramatically, and sugar production became deeply connected with enslaved labor in the Caribbean. Eventually, industrial processing transformed chocolate again. The result was a food that had traveled across continents, changed ingredients, changed technologies, and changed social meaning. The modern chocolate bar is therefore not an ancient food preserved unchanged. It is the latest stage in a very long history of experimentation. 5. What we know. 1. Cacao is native to tropical regions of the Americas. The cacao tree Theobroma cacao is associated with tropical environments of the Americas. Genetic and archaeological research has increasingly emphasized the upper Amazon as a major center in cacao's early history. 2. Cacao use is at least approximately 5,300 years old. The Santa Ana La Florida evidence in southeastern Ecuador includes cacao starch, theobromine residues, and ancient DNA. Together, these provide unusually strong evidence for ancient cacao use. 3. Early cacao was not necessarily chocolate in the modern sense. Ancient people processed cacao in ways that differed significantly from modern chocolate manufacture. The familiar sequence of fermentation, drying, roasting, and grinding became an important part of cacao processing traditions. 4. Mesoamerican societies developed important cacao traditions. The Maya consumed cacao beverages centuries before European contact. Chemical analysis of vessels from northern Belize provides evidence evidence for cacao consumption by approximately 600 BC. 5. Cacao could be socially and ritually important. Maya vessels paintings and archaeological contexts indicate that cacao was associated with feasting elite culture and ritual life. Some vessels were specifically designed for preparing or serving cacao beverages. 6. Cacao could have economic value. Historical evidence indicates that cacao beans were used as currency in parts of Mesoamerica. This demonstrates how a food product could become part of a wider economic system. 7. Chocolate traveled north and became part of long-distance exchange. Evidence from Chaco Canyon shows cacao consumption in the ancient American Southwest around the 9th century CE, suggesting long-distance connections with cacao-producing regions farther south. 8. Europeans transformed chocolate. Chocolate entered Europe as a luxury beverage. European consumers increasingly combined cacao with ingredients and preparation methods that differed from earlier Mesoamerican traditions. Chocolate became part of elite European consumption before gradually becoming more widely available. 6. What remains uncertain? Several important questions remain unresolved. When exactly was cacao first domesticated? The archaeological record shows very early use, but first use and full domestication, and not necessarily the same event. The transition from wild exploitation to deliberate cultivation probably occurred gradually. Where was cacao first domesticated? Current evidence strongly points toward the Upper Amazon as an early center, but the complete story of cacao's domestication and dispersal is still being reconstructed through archaeology and genetics. What did the earliest cacao beverages taste like? We can reconstruct some processing methods, but recipes from 5,000 years ago are largely inaccessible. Ancient cacao probably tasted radically different from modern sweetened chocolate. Were the earliest cacao products always beverages? No. Evidence for cacao use does not automatically tell us the exact form in which it was consumed. Did the Olmec invent chocolate? This is often repeated in popular histories, but the evidence does not allow such a simple conclusion. The archaeological record shows cacao use before and during the period associated with later Mesoamerican civilizations, but assigning a single inventor is not justified. How was cacao cultivated in ancient Maya landscapes? Tropical environments often preserve botanical remains poorly. Researchers therefore have less direct evidence about ancient cacao orchards than they would like. 7. Evidence summary. Evidence: what it tells us. Confidence. Cacao starch grains. Ancient cacao processing and use strong. Theobromine residues. Cacao presence in vessel strong. Ancient cacao DNA presence and movement of cacao strong. Ceramic vessels. Food and drink preparation context strong. Maya art social and ritual importance strong. Written colonial records. Later indigenous cacao practices strong, but later botanical remains cultivation history more limited. Exact ancient recipes, taste and preparation details limited. Earliest domestication event. Long-term agricultural history still developing. The strongest archaeological case comes from multiple independent forms of evidence rather than a single artifact. The Ecuadorian studies combination of starch, theobromine and ancient DNA is particularly important. 8. Competing interpretations. Interpretation 1. Upper Amazon origin and early domestication. This interpretation is strongly supported by the combination of archaeological and genetic evidence. It places the earliest currently known cacao use and domestication history in the Upper Amazon region rather than treating Mesoamerica as the original birthplace of cacao cultivation. Interpretation 2. Mesoamerica as the key center of cacao cultural development. Even though the earliest known evidence comes from South America, Mesoamerican civilizations were enormously important in